Okay, so let's start. Hello and welcome everyone to the Marine Biodiversity Networking Fridays. And thank you all for joining us today. And it's indeed a pleasure to have everyone on board. So just a quick introduction. I'm Irina Labia and I'm a postdoc researcher here at Hokkaido University's Arctic Research Center. And today I will be moderating the session on the Global Ocean Observing System and the related activities in the Asia-Pacific region. With us are two distinguished scientists who will be sharing their work as well as the related activities on these topics. And we have first Dr. Karen Evans, who will be presenting on essential ocean variables within the context of a global ocean observation system. And this is to provide a better understanding of marine life and to meet universal goals in sustainable development and conservation. We also do have Dr. Sanae Chiba, who will present the role of the North Pacific Marine Science Organization, otherwise known as PICES, as an intergovernmental organization established for promoting science collaboration in the North Pacific. So this is just a quick reminder. We will be having, again, two speakers for today, and we have an intended 15-minute question and answer session at the end of the two talks. And I would encourage everyone to join in for the discussion later. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker for this morning and this evening on the other side of the globe. The first speaker is Dr. Karen Evans, and Dr. Evans is a principal research scientist and team leader with CSIRO Oceans and Atmosphere based in Hobart, Tasmania. She leads and contributes to research focused on progressing scientific understanding and developing options to improve marine resource management, particularly in relation to national and international fisheries and threatened, endangered, and protected species. Her projects also deliver strategic research to national agencies as well as regional programs in the Pacific and Indian Oceans and international agencies, including the United Nations. She co-chairs a panel of experts developing a global set of measurable indicators of ocean biology and ecology for the Global Ocean Observing System and is a member of the group of experts guiding the United Nations regular World Ocean Assessment process. With that, let's welcome Dr. Evans and pass the floor to her. Dr. Evans, please.
Thank you very much, Irene. I'll just share my screen. And hopefully you can all see that. Is that okay, Irene?
Yes, it's coming out perfect.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for logging on today. I'd just like to start by recognising the traditional owners on the land on which I'm coming to you today. I'm based in Nipaluna, Lutrawina, which is Hobart, Tasmania, and that is the lands of the Palawa people of the Muwinina Nation. And I acknowledge that there are leaders past and present and their unceded recognition of land and sea country here in Australia. So as mentioned, I'm going to provide you with a bit of an overview of the Global Ocean Observing System, or GOOS as it is known. And in particular, I'll be presenting some of the work that we've been doing in developing a framework for observations of marine life that supports decision-making across multiple scales. And I'd just like to recognise my co-chair of this particular panel, Gabrielle Canonico, who also helped with preparing this particular presentation. So what is GOOS? GOOS is led by the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. Its activities are framed within its most recent strategy, the 2030 strategy, which has been developed around the key driver of society's increasing needs for ocean data and knowledge for sustainable development and delivering that information within a global and connected system so that that information is available at multiple scales depending on societal needs. Within this framing and and also more direct drivers, such as commitments made by countries under international agreements, such as the Sustainable Development Goals, various global conventions and initiatives, such as the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development and the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. The strategy recognises the need to integrate marine life observations into a global system. So how does GOOS do this? GOOS provides a platform that provides guidance and direction on what to observe on the left, and it does this through the identification of what are called essential ocean variables, or EOVs, that span physics, biogeochemistry, and biology and ecosystems. In association with each of these variables, it provides guidance on the core aspects of those variables needing to be collected. So the basics of what needs to be collected through time to determine if systems are changing and how they are changing. And then in increasing order of complexity, which might be determined by resources, equipment, and capability available, additional aspects for providing context to those changes. It also provides direction on how to collect those observations, the analyses that might be needed, and how to manage those observations through the provision of best practices that all of the ocean community can contribute to and share. It provides platforms for connecting and sharing ocean observations through programs such as the Ocean Biogeographic Information System, or OBIS, where the ocean community can make their observations and the information on the programs collecting them visible to the rest of the world. And it also provides a platform for national and regional observation systems to be linked and share knowledge. And then finally, it provides a platform from which all of these linkages can work together to develop data and information products that can be utilised by the ocean community, including researchers, industry, and governments. So GOOS has been progressing the integration of marine life observations into a global system through an expert panel on biology and ecosystems, which is one of 3 panels providing guidance and direction on coordinating ocean observations. And the work of the panel is focused around an initial set of 10 essential ocean variables, or EOVs. These biology and ecosystem EOVs, or Bioeco EOVs in a shortened form, were identified through a review of societal needs as reflected in more than 20 international conventions and multilateral agreements relevant for marine life. And I'll touch a little more on those conventions and linkages a little further in the presentation. This review also looked at biological ocean observations measured by over 100 observing programs and the impact, feasibility and scalability of these variables and how they might contribute to address societal and scientific needs. The 10 EOVs, which represent functional groups as well as biogenic habitats, were selected based on their relevance in helping to solve science questions and the need for the information to inform management of marine resources and the feasibility of making these measurements globally, considering costs, available technologies and human resources. More recently, the panel has been working on translating the turtle, bird and mammal EOV on the far right into 3 separate EOVs. And this really has come about through community consultation, in recognising that the communities and some of the variables associated with those 3 taxa groups are quite different. And we've also been working with the other 2 GOOS panels on developing an EOV on ocean sound in collaboration with the physics panel and a EOV on ocean colour in collaboration with the biogeochemical panel. Part of the work that the panel has been undertaking in progressing the EOVs, which is an extension of that initial review of observing programs, is to better identify, understand and connect programs that are collecting marine life observations. Recognising and connecting with the various networks around the globe is essential if we want to connect the community together to document best practices for ocean observing, develop products for users, and to be able to bring observations together for reporting at scale and integrating biological observations into global models. So as part of a project known as a Pegasus project, which was funded through Future Earth and the National Centre for Ecological Analysis and Synthesis, or NCES, we conducted a survey of biological ocean observing programs and identified 203 active, long-term, that is 5 or more years old, programs that systematically sample one or more of the Bioeco EOVs. Once put together, those observations collected by those programs spanned only 7% of the ocean surface. That means that based on those 203 programs, 93% of the ocean surface is unmonitored in a sustained and systematic way. Now, we know that the survey was an initial first pass at understanding those global observation programs. And so our current priority is to support some expanded identification of observing systems collecting bioeco EOVs to build on that initial survey, supporting the expansion of observations and ensuring wide accessibility to the data generated. And as part of those efforts, in collaboration with UNDOS, we've recently launched the GOOS Bioeco Portal. And this portal aims to provide open access metadata and information on global biological and ecosystem ocean observations and monitoring programs. And ultimately, the aim is to provide insight into the current and historical state and trends of global ocean observation. So on the right of this particular screen is a screenshot of the main interface of the portal with the map on the far right and the filterable EOVs and other metadata information on the 579 networks currently input into the portal on the screenshot on the left. At the moment, what I'm showing you here is just the observations for this particular region, the Asia Pacific region, for zooplankton. And you can see that there are 193 monitoring programs and their observations are mapped out onto that map. So the metadata that the portal holds is extractable and they can be filtered, providing easily accessible information on where, when, how and what EOVs are being collected, which provides ready information on the state of global ocean observations of biology and ecosystems. The panel is also engaging with the community through workshops held in conjunction with conferences, working groups such as the two that are currently funded through the Scientific Committee on Oceanic Research. We have one on seagrass and one on fish visual census techniques. And we're also providing input into the development of regional observing systems through funding through Europe and also in the US. And we're also contributing to the programs of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And specifically, GOOS is leading 3 programs as part of the UN Decade of Ocean Science. Ocean Observing Co-Design, which is focused on building the frameworks for the co-design of integrated observing systems and connecting observations to modelling activities. Observing Together, which is focused on connecting observations across scales from communities upwards. And the third program is Coast Predict, which is focusing on building coastal observations for better predicting change in coastal systems, and particularly with relevance to coastal communities. And the panel has also been building partnerships with other networks, including the Marine Biodiversity Observation Network, MBON, to ensure alignment of observations and sharing of knowledge to add value and leverage opportunities. And to ensure that we're working together to deliver information for answering key questions and addressing key issues for science and society within the framework of international commitments, such as those associated with the Sustainable Development Goals. And ultimately, we want to ensure that a global ocean observing system is delivering essential information needed in the right formats for uptake into global, regional and national decision-making, and contributing to those assessments that governments are basing their decisions on. And on the left of this screen is some initial mapping that we did in terms of what international conventions and agreements each of the EOVs could inform, and what we're ultimately aiming to achieve is for those EOVs to inform indices that then go on to inform assessments made at global, regional and national scales. So in thinking about how we can bring the marine life observing community together to deliver what is needed by society, there are several points at which we can leverage and complement efforts and build partnerships to ensure that key observations are identified, collection is enhanced, data generated is utilised, and those observations are delivered where they are needed. And I'd just like to finish by acknowledging the people currently involved in the panel identified here, and those that have contributed to the panel in the past as it has developed. It certainly does take a village to build an observation system at a global scale and deliver better understanding of our ocean, and also to connect our ocean to those elements of society where it is needed. And I'll finish there, and thank you very much for your time.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Evans, for that very wonderful talk on GOOS updates, especially on the data that's being collected under the essential ocean variables. And again, it's just a quick reminder, we will have the question and answer session later after the two talks. And if you have any questions, please drop it in the question and answer box. So moving on to our next speaker for today, we have Dr. Sanae Chiba. And Dr. Sanae is a biological oceanographer who had studied long-term ecosystem changes in the North Pacific Ocean at the Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology since 2000. Through her participation in various international programs, such as the Global Comparisons of Zooplankton Time Series and the North Pacific Continuous Plankton Recorder, along with the international frameworks such as the GOOS Biology Ecosystem Panel and World Ocean Assessment 2, she became an advocate of international collaboration in ocean science and communication across scientific disciplines. More recently, she was on secondment to the UNEP World Conservation Monitoring Center in the UK from 2016 to 2019, where she learned practical methods to apply to the science policy interface and its importance in marine social science. In summer of 2021, she has joined the North Pacific Marine Science Organization as the Deputy Executive Secretary. The timing coincided with the launch of the UN Decade of Ocean Science and the emergence of the post-pandemic paradigm in global society. She's thrilled to see how PICES will work with global colleagues to deliver the UN Decade of Science outcomes in a changing world. with that, let's welcome our second speaker for today, Dr. Chiba Sanae. Please.
Thank you, Irina. So let me share my screen.
Yeah. Oops.
It's end.
Yeah.
It's okay. Okay,
Yes.
let me start. So first of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak at this webinar. And so as Irina introduced, I have been working in ecosystem change study using long-term zooplankton time series, and I've been involved in several international programs. And also I was a member of the GOOS Bioeco Panel since its beginning. So I can say I'm a hardcore advocate of the establishment of the global observation network. So now I'm working for the Secretariat of the North Pacific Marine Science Organization, aka PICES. For people who are not familiar with PICES, the PICES is an intergovernmental organization comprises of 6 member countries around the North Pacific Ocean. So PICES functions as forum which provides our community with opportunities and frameworks for collaboratively creating and sharing scientific knowledge. So here's a structure of PICES. The governing council is a decision-making body, and its member consist of the national delegate of the member countries. And the science board is in charge of setting the direction of PICES science. So science board has 7 standing committees, and under the committees, there are expert groups which implement a specific scientific project in multidisciplinary areas. So the activity of these expert groups are integrated and mapped on the social, ecological, environmental system framework, which is set by the PICES flagship program, Future. So the schematic depicts the links between the foci of PICES expert groups and over the 4 components: climate system, processes, process study, the marine ecosystem, and the human system. But let me point out here, so central of this system is the long-term and sustainable monitoring and assessment. So the PICES puts the emphasis on the monitoring and assessment. So the title of this talk is the PICES role in the global biodiversity observation network. So it's obvious that our role is to provide useful knowledge on the North Pacific Ocean to the international community for the solution of the global issues. So there have been lots of biological monitoring activities going on, and the data are accumulated in the North Pacific. So it's our responsibility to promote sharing the outcomes with the global community. So as you know, there are various international initiatives related to ocean observing, but so they look different, but the major objective of these are common, more or less. That is, how can we effectively collect and use scientific knowledge to deliver a good ocean, which is a healthy, resilient, safe, inspiring, productive ocean? So how can we make people happy with that good ocean? So using the strategic framework, this and the PICES is keen to work with the global community to fulfill the common goal. So let me back to the PICES science expert group and see the relevance between them to GOOS EOV. First, under the Fishery Science Committee, the activity of these 2 working groups are relevant to GOOS Fish EOV. Then, under the Biological Oceanographic Committee, section of marine birds and mammals and the project Sea Turtle are relevant to turtle bird mammal EOV. And section of a harmful algal bloom, and the working group zooplankton imaging system could contribute to phytoplankton and zooplankton EOVs respectively. But these studies, the studies of this group are not necessarily monitoring focus. So maybe more relevant to M-bond EBV rather than the GOOS EOV. So you see the most relevant framework here in the monitor committee. So monitor committee has North Pacific Continuous Plankton Record Survey project. So this is a part of the global CPR network, GACS, called GACS. And the GACS is already been designated as the pilot project of zooplankton EBV, the GOOS. And also here, I would like to highlight the activity of advisory panel of the North Pacific Coastal Ocean Observing System called NPCOOS, because its term of reference includes clearly stated the engagement of ocean observing system. The NPCOOS has been interested in global EOV and M-bond EBV. So they convened the session at the PICES annual meeting a couple of years ago, and aiming to assess the current readiness for observing biological EOV in the PICES community. And I myself was invited to talk to introduce and promote GOOS EOV. And Dr. Erin Sattersworth also gave her talk on how PICES could get involved in GOOS EOV scheme. And last year, the group held the follow-up workshop to discuss the observation opportunities, method, required technology, and data sharing issue. And now they are conducting an online survey and plan to write a journal paper on how, where, and for what purpose the different PICES countries are monitoring EOVs. So I show this again, the Karen already showed this, but the GOOS Bioeco Portal has recently launched the metadata portal. Here is a mapping of metadata of 10 EOVs. So as you see, as I said in the previous slide, there are lots of monitoring projects and data in North Pacific region. So it is not bad at all compared to the other regions. We have done a good job. But let me clarify. So this is based on the information submitted by scientists who are willing to share the information. So therefore, there should be more and more dots, the data point, which are not reported. And the issue is that many of these metadata are not registered to OBIS yet. So there is, of course, the issue for data sharing and data accessibility. So and this is also from the Erin's recent paper, and which shows the recommendations for establishing the foundation for the global observation system for marine life. So as seen in the previous slide, one of the issues with implementing EOV is data accessibility. The other issue is, this is a very more challenging problem, is the coordination of monitoring. So I will pick these two recommendations and issue and identify the obstacles, the challenges to improving them. So some of them are very specific to the PICES community. So here are the 3 challenges in implementing GOOS EOV in a PICES community. So let me pick each of these and think about possible actions to take. The first one is a general and a classic issue for comparison of biological time series. So let me use the example of the zooplankton data. So we scientists sometimes dream about a system such as a super bioalgo, which can collect biodiversity data globally in a fully operational and standardized manner. But standardization of the zooplankton observation is unrealistic at this moment, at least, because every project, monitoring project, design the sampling method to fit the regionally specific purpose of observation. We cannot compare the data taken by different sampling years, like different depths and seasons. So we want a way to coordinating monitoring without standardization of method. Well, we have to be the creative, but good news is there are always lower hanging fruits. So this is the outcome, one of the outcomes of the SCORE working group, global comparison of zooplankton time series. Here we compare the anomaly of long-term zooplankton changes in relation to temperature variation in North Sea and Western North Pacific. So as you see, the sampling method and the original unit of the data between these two projects are different, you know, the abundance versus wet weight, and also the specific zooplankton species versus total zooplankton biomass. But still, you know, you can compare the regional ecosystem response to the large scale, you know, the change and the climatic forcing and environmental changes. And the next challenge is the lack of interest in the community. So from my experience in PICES, also in the Japanese community, the response to GOOS initiative not always enthusiastic. Then I see the one of the reasons is that the concept is difficult and too complex to understand. So, you know, the idea was being developed through years of exhausting discussion among the experts. So it's great. The concept is great, but and then I have tried to explain the background and the concept of this concept on several occasions. But as you see in the action plan in the PICES and PICES, there's a lot of confusion on the definition of EOV and EBV and indicators. They're quite often used in a mix-up manner. So at the PICES and PICES workshop last year, it is suggested that it is time to go beyond the concept. We need actual case study. So they want to see actual and tangible example of how we can develop the indicator of specific phenomena of issues such as coral bleaching using multiple GOOS EOVs. And those indicators used to be the management application. So we can learn from the success story of these case studies. And then we can set out our own pilot study using the best available data set. And please note, and here is the indicator, includes the official indicator of high-level international policy such as CBD and SDG. So the national, every country are subject to commit. So they must be interested in to contribute to them using GOOS EOV. The last one is cultural and political diversity of member countries. The PICES consists of only 6 countries, but the cultural and political diversity amongst the country is huge. So I'm from Japan. So Japan has historically put large effort into the ocean monitoring and possess a great database. And probably it's same to Russia, Korea, and China. But these countries have their own business practice and the data sharing policy. And these are quite different from the current international standards, which are developed by the leadership of Western countries. And also another thing is recent progress in global ocean observing initiative keep producing new concepts, the terms and the frameworks, such as, you know, the fair data standard and ocean best practice, interoperability. The EOV is one of them. So definition of, for example, the scientific term, universal and clear. So the scientists can collaborate their scientific research without excellent English language skill or understanding. However, these definitions are rather vague And it's difficult for non-English speaking people to get the context well. So that discourages many Japanese experts, as long as I observed, to get involved in UNDOS-related international projects. So tackle this problem, I think we need communication expertise more than the conventional science communication. So I feel we need the help of science interpreter and the professional of science diplomacy. So science diplomacy, I keep saying this like a mantra at various occasions. At the same time, we need to foster such professional and skill in younger generations who particularly play a crucial role in UNDOS. So I talked about the challenges, but challenges bring opportunities. So the launch of the UNDOS provides the ocean science community an ocean of opportunity to shine in solidarity. So PICES and AEST are jointly sponsoring the UNDOS-endorsed program, SmartNet. So SmartNet is a network program. Its goal is to establish a global knowledge network for ocean science. It will support and leverage PICES member countries' activities for the generation and the transfer of scientific knowledge. So just for information, PICES is an intergovernmental organization which comprises 20 member countries in the North Atlantic. So together, the SmartNet geographical coverage extends to the entire Northern Hemisphere, including the Arctic Ocean. But our ambition is to reach out to communities beyond the Northern Hemisphere. The SmartNet aims to facilitate partnership and joint activities with global communities, including developing states, to bring solutions to the global issues. So we have already developed good communication with communities and organizations in Asian nations, and Southern Hemisphere. SmartNet has key thematic topics in which ICES and PICES have expertise and mutual interest as shown here. And these topics are addressed by the existing ICES-PICES joint working group listed here and through the collaboration with new partners. But what I want to stress here more is the cross-cutting theme of the SmartNet, such as capacity development, the promotion of early career scientists, engagement and empowerment of underrepresented communities. These topics were implemented through the ICES-PICES frameworks for promotion of early career ocean professional, science communication strategy, and capacity development schemes, and so on. Also through networking with new partners. So for example, the ICES-PICES sponsored International Early Career Scientist Conference every 4 and 5 years to promote their career building and engage them in leadership in PICES, ICES, and UNDOS. The latest conference was held back in July in Newfoundland. So these people are fearless and honestly intimidating to me. And they're the people with interdisciplinary perspective from the beginning of their careers. And these are people who are willing to work in the international environment and quickly absorb new technology and concept without hesitation. So I expect they will bring the breakthrough, the challenges for global biodiversity observation too. So this is a summary. I think I'm already running out of the time, so I'm not going to read, but to show one by one. Dun, 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 dun. So this is the end of my presentation. Any question, welcome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sanae, for that wonderful introduction to the PICES program, PICES ICES programs, and also an overview of the enormous effort that has been put into this different existing programs now. And that goes as well to the earlier talk by Dr. Karen Evans, and talking about the GOOS platform and framework, and both of these are at their both of these projects are sort of programs or frameworks are big and enormous in the effort that has been put in to collect and also to disseminate data sets on the global ocean. So with this, I would like to thank the two speakers now, and I would open the floor for questions. And we do have actually a couple of questions dropped on the chat box and the question and answer chat box. I'll go first with the first question in line. I think that Dr. Evans has already answered this, but I will just read the first question from Pedro. So the question is, are the EOVs and EBVs the same for all regions of the world, or do they have some specific subset of indicators for some regions? And who should I connect in Africa to provide data from Angola? So this is the question for Dr. Evans. And Dr. Evans, could you just please go through your answer? Thanks.
Sure. In terms of the GOOS EOVs, they've been designed so that they can be implemented globally, and designed in such a way that they're actually scalable. So you can collect just very basics, or depending on your resources available, you can add complexity to those variables. We don't have regional nodes, not at this point in time anyway, because we have designed the EOVs in that way, in that they could be deployed very simply right across the globe, and then depending on your resources, added complexity can be added to that. And the same in terms of making observations accessible to the rest of the world, rather than having separate nodes. We have the Bioeco Portal, which is it's a one-stop shop in effect, that you can go to better understand what observations are being collected around the globe, but also to contribute observations that you might be collecting through your sustained program as well into that portal. The real aim in having kind of one space that you can go to is that it allows all of those observing programs to connect in the one spot, rather than having separate nodes that then need to be connected and creating multiple levels at which people are connecting. Noting that it is useful for people to know who's around in their region, but hopefully the Bioeco Portal allows for that identification of who else, in my example, say, who else in Australia is collecting a particular EOV, and how do I connect with them?
Yeah. And well, just a quick note, maybe on an end user point of view. So I'm also looking at some of the data sets, and one of the big challenge for me is trying to get some data from different portals. And I don't know if at the end of the analysis, I started out with, trying to match all these data points, and it's pretty much the sort of a concern of the redundancy in the data availability, and it's adding a layer of processing for for scientists or for the analyst of the data sets before coming into analysis that would soon be communicated into communities and other stakeholders down the line.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that's definitely a key aim of ours, is to ensure that data sets are actually interoperable. So even if you've collected your observations slightly differently, the way that they come into the portal means that you can actually connect those data sets without having to go through that process, which can be quite challenging, as you've said, in actually getting, and also Sanae has also highlighted this in her talk, is how do you actually bring those data sets together so that you can start to do those kind of national, regional and global assessments.
Yeah, I don't know if Dr. Sanae has some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I think Karen will said everything. So
yeah. Okay, so we have 3 more questions on the chat box. One is the next one would be intended for or addressed to Dr. Sanae. And the question is, how do you incorporate citizen science in your data sets? Which is,
yeah, and personally, I see a great possibility in student science. You know, that I myself have experience in collaborating with the selling community to collect the not biological data, but marine plastic data. So yeah, and SmartNet, the PICES and SmartNet have had no connection, and really no connection to the student science group, but the collaboration with those student science group and it's under our scope. So actually, we will plan to have a workshop to how to collaborate with those people, how the PICES scientists can incorporate the data taken by the student science in next year. So the SmartNet is still early stage. So now we are in a stage of networking, making a network. So we will, I can personally, I will do promote this topic within the SmartNet.
Yeah, and I think also citizen science is getting a lot of attention these days. And one of the questions that I have in mind or sort of concern is, again, going back to how do you sort of standardize this information? So it's like always coming back to that. I know that there are some papers coming out with observations coming from citizen science, and it's always the thought that, okay, how are this data collected, and are there any sort of effort to sort of standardize these observations before they're coming to the analysis, for instance?
I mean that's as I said in my presentation, the perfect standardization is impossible in biological data. So we have to be the creative to find a way to compare those data without the standardizing. So that is the coordination of the monitoring without the perfect standardization. So that is a probably proper approach. I mean, realistic approach to take.
Yeah, and some thoughts.
So one of the I was just going to say, one of the things that we've been involved with and promoting is the Ocean Best Practices program, which is somewhat trying to get kind of at that problem from I guess, first principles. So putting up best practices and protocols for surveys, for collecting information, for putting together metadata records, so that there is, that guidance that is provided to people if they're unsure. And it's something that programs can work to develop into their citizen science programs as well, because certainly, that's a big issue. And, these citizen science programs can be exceptionally valuable, and they incorporate an incredible enthusiasm of people, and we want to be able to capture that enthusiasm and ensure that the data and the information that are collected through those programs are utilised in the best possible way. So one of those approaches is really to start generating those best practices that can then be shared and implemented across various programs.
Yeah, that's true. I do agree that citizen science is it's a big sort of data source that the scientific community can tap in. It's just that putting this protocol best practices into place, and a lot of people are actually excited to take part of that and being part of the solution, I may say. And then I'll just move on to, we still have like 3 more questions. I don't know if do you want to ask the questions in person, or do I have to read it? We have one question from Yamakita Takehisa, or should I just read it instead? Okay, so it's more of a practical questions, and it's addressed, I guess, to both of you. It seems that there are not much quantitative EOV data in OBIS yet. Do you or GOOS expecting to receive EOV data using OBIS? So that's the question.
So I can take a go at that. So OBIS is not a raw data portal. OBIS is the place that you come to understand who is collecting ocean observations, where they're collecting it, how they're collecting it, and where to connect with those observations. We totally recognise that individual institutions have their own databases, and some are feeding into national databases. In Australia, certainly my organisation, the CSIRO, contributes to the Australian Ocean Data Network portal. So OBIS is really the place that you come to, and then you connect with the observations. It's not intended to be a raw data source, but rather a place that you come to find out who you need to connect to then connect to those observations.
Okay, so thanks for that quick thought on the previous question, and I'll go a little bit quickly on the next 3 questions we have. First one is from Erin, and she's asking if at least to 2 speakers, if we might have how we might connect the EOVs, EBVs to essential societal variables. And do you know of efforts working to develop and connect this? So I would throw this question to both of our speakers, please.
Can I first?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's of course we should connect this, because EOV, EBV are just a variable, so that it cannot be used for the decision making, a policy maker itself. They need indicator. So these indicators are developed using the multiple EOVs. So it could include the essential social variable too. So it depends on which kind of the issue, the phenomena they focus on. Yeah, so of course it's very valuable to use the EOVs and the essential social variable together to address some the societal issue to make an indicator.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree with Sanae. The EOVs and the EBVs are kind of the starting point. And where you actually want to get to is the data product or the information product that can then be used by the decision maker. And so where you actually connect the EOVs or the EBVs with something like the essential societal variables is in that data product. It's not a direct connection. It's kind of, you kind of utilize both to be able to come up with the data product that a decision maker can then utilize.
Yeah, it's one of the end products that that scientists and scientists can actually work into, especially that it's something that you communicate and it's communicate to the stakeholders and it's easily understood. So it's something that people can relate to. And even now, I think that a lot of the projects and funding agencies are really into some sort of outreach or some sort of a way of communicating this result to the different stakeholders. Then I'll just quickly move on to another question we have here is that, do you have any program project on the blue economy and what the EOVs in this in terms of ocean energy and bioresources?
And PICES is not strong in this area of blue economy. So we might, fill the gap through the networking of the SmartNet, but not at this moment.
So again, I'd kind of come back to what the EOVs are actually about. So they're the basic observations that you might utilize to produce some products that are useful for the blue economy. So we don't collect observations of the blue economy because the blue economy can take very, very different forms in very different parts of the world and is actually constructed of lots of different components. So having a blue economy EOV is it's almost not what an EOV is all about. The EOV is about collecting observations on a particular variable and then connecting those observations with others to produce data products that might be utilized in terms of the blue economy and developing the blue economy in a sustainable way and understanding how the blue economy interacts with the ocean and the biological components of the ocean.
Yeah, and I think it comes back again to the earlier question on the essential societal variables. So blue economy is definitely one of these venues that the different EOVs as well as essential biological variables can sort of help out in putting out outputs for this particular purpose. Then I'll move on to another question in here from Carlos. It's both addressed to both of our speakers. Okay, my question is, do you also collect and share deep sea data? Deep sea data, it's like,
so one of the things that we're currently, at least in the initial kind of discussion phase, is connecting with the deep sea observation community, and particularly those that are involved in the UN decade of ocean science. So that, for example, the Deep Ocean Observation System, in thinking about whether we expand our current EOVs to also include the deep ocean. At the moment, they're very much focused kind of on the surface and mid-ocean. And whether we expand the current EOVs or whether we develop a new set of EOVs which are specific to the deep ocean. So it's certainly discussions that we're in the early stages of having and thinking about, but certainly there's some enthusiasm for doing exactly that.
Yeah, and also the GOOS had the DOS, Deep Ocean Observing System, to promote the monitoring of deep sea ocean, deep ocean.
Yeah, and in my very limited knowledge, I would say that we don't know a lot about the deep ocean, deep sea environment, and it's definitely a way to go to, to have a robust and a holistic understanding of how the ocean as a whole works. Finally, we have one question from the chat box, and it says, what about the language barriers that may hamper stakeholder engagement? And I guess it's addressed to both of our speakers.
Yeah, in reality, definitely. But more than the language, it's I think I see the problem in the cultural difference in the business practice, difference in the business practice, the tradition, political difference. Yeah, it's not only the language.
Yeah, I would agree. It goes beyond just language. It's also understanding those cultural differences and how people, how people operate within different cultures, and not only understanding that, but respecting that, and working with different nationalities to come up with constructive ways forward. But it's definitely a challenge, and it's a challenge that happens right around the globe, and certainly one that we're conscious of.
Yeah, I would second those thoughts. Indeed, it's very, for scientists working on their separate researches, for instance, it's pretty much difficult to sort of engage people from other countries, for communities, especially for stakeholders, trying to put people together from different background, cultures. It's a tremendous challenge for anyone and for any organization. So I would say that it would be good to also to have this kind of networking, reaching out to, say, other scientists who from other countries that can also facilitate within their sort of region to come up with kind of conferences or seminars involving a lot of stakeholders.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think making those connections with the networks that are sitting within those regions, who can then connect more effectively throughout that region. They already have their networks built up, and so it's identifying and connecting with those networks to expand that outreach, I think is really, really important.
Yeah. That was a very engaging and stimulating session for today. And I think we all have answered all the questions put into the chat box. Just one more call. If there are other questions, comments to the speakers,
I think
There's-
Frank has asked a question
Okay.
in the chat. Frank, did you want to ask that question directly?
Yeah, thank you. First, let me congratulate you, Karen and Sanae, for really great talks, very good summaries. So I think it's important to do exactly what you said in terms of networking around the world. But my question is, we often see these observing systems from the point of view of scientists and design them to collect scientific data to address scientific questions. And so what I wonder is how do we better engage other stakeholders in designing the observing systems in a way that is practical to address other types of questions, not just those that come from a scientific community?
Yeah, that's a great question, Frank. And I think there's kind of different ways that you could approach that. I can give an Australian example. So we have a national ocean observing system, which is called the Integrated Marine Ocean System. And that system, yes, it has a lot of scientists contributing to it, but it's actually overseen by an advisory board that is constituted of many different stakeholders. So it's not just science that's directing the observation system, it's also government, it's also industry representatives. And one of the things that it does really well is that it connects through what is called our national infrastructure program into those other stakeholders. That's just one approach that can be taken from a kind of national observing system point of view. But certainly I know that GOOS is trying to engage a lot more with outside of the scientific community, and particularly with those end users that might be utilising ocean products, not just ocean observations, but ocean products into various components of industry. So it's about making those connections, and sometimes they're helped through facilitation, through national initiatives, but reaching out and trying to engage with those components of the community, I think is really essential. And I know that the UN Decade of Ocean Science is certainly trying to connect science with those other components of the community, the ocean community, to help facilitate some of those conversations. But I totally agree with you, Frank. We're often driven by science and often not looking outside of science, and that's a real challenge for us. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, I agree with Karen, but I think in short, the end user stakeholder don't need biological data. They need a way of solution of data. So, we can provide the biological data to useful for solve the certain issue. So the question we should ask the new stakeholders to seek the stakeholder is, what kind of ocean-related problem you have? Then, once we figure out the issue, the problem, the both sides, the stakeholder and the scientist, biologist can reach out. So that is, I cannot say and describe well, but that is my idea. They don't need biological data. If I ask, they said, "What's that?"
Yeah.
Thanks. That's very useful. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, everyone. Thank you, Frank. I'm sorry for missing your question in the chat box, but thank you for bringing it up. And I'll definitely agree with the points raised and earlier raised by both of our speakers, and I and Karen. And it's indeed a challenge for scientists to get out of the of our own boxes and really, communicate with people that are directly affected or are has direct link with ocean and ocean environment. So it's an open challenge for everyone. And with that, I would like to thank all our speakers and all our attendees for today. Thank you for making this online webinar a success, and thank you for the very engaging and stimulating discussions that we have. And for other questions, you can definitely, I hope we can definitely directly ask our speakers if you have any other questions after the talks. Thank you, Sanae and Karen, and thank you for the organizers who had put a lot of effort in arranging this meeting. I think that would be all. Thank you and have a great day and a great weekend ahead. Thanks.
Thank you.